here. And it's the three angels' messages, which I can't actually read on the screen, but I'll read from my Bible perhaps. And it's verse 6 to 10, I think, or 6 to 9. And it says, I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation, kindred, and tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, Fear God, and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made the heaven and the earth, the sea, and the fountains of water. And the second angel said, And there followed another angel, saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city that made the nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. And the third angel followed them, and saying with a loud voice, If any man worship the beast or his image, receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand. And have you ever stopped to think, how is this actually going to happen? How is this going to happen? And I have a burden that's only going to happen when people get off their seats and they go out and they start and they tell these messages. We're the angels here. We're the messengers. And in the power of God, through the Spirit, we go out and do that. And this, my burden is to go out and give things and give books out. And I've got a friend, and there's a picture here, I think, of Mark. Mark's in the middle with the blue shirt. And about 10, 12 years ago, we started doing DVDs and some pamphlets and things like that. We gave them out at the Road to Bethlehem. It started, we bought the DVD printers, and we would print off messages, and we did various things. And basically, sometimes we'd go into the city and we'd hand out to see whoever we could meet. And those DVDs, that morphed into some books. And you can see this is a picture of our book table at Flinders Street Station. This is a couple of years ago, and another day we actually got moved to the other side of the street. This is just on the Swanston Street side of the station, and we started to give out these books, and there was a bit of a journey. Mark ended up moving to Thailand. We had a bit of a ministry there. He stayed there, and he was giving out books in Thailand. And there's another picture of our tables. And so we set this up and we give out these books. And this giving out these books has become a lot easier. And to give you an idea, sometimes we can give out 400 or 500 books in a day, maybe even 1,000 books in a day, and a lot of books go out. But not usually 1,000, but you probably easily give out 200 to 500 books to random people that come along. Okay, there's another picture, and it's just it's all the sort of books that you probably got out the back there mostly, and a few others. The main book I suppose we give out is the Great Controversy, and we have another book which we call the Combo, which is the last 8 chapters of the Great Controversy, and Steps to Christ as well, paired on the back of it. And I've lost my place in my PowerPoints here, but we have these books. I'm going to go back and see. We have. I just want to tell the story a little bit about how we came to get the combos. I think that's a stack of our combo books. It is. We had a donation of some money, and we were thinking what we used to give out is just the last 8 chapters of the Great Controversy, and had this idea that we would that we really, the last 8 chapters was great, and it received we gave out a lot of these books, but it needed something to soften it. If you know the last 8 chapters of the Great Controversy, it's very much about prophecy and what the events are that are coming on the world, which is why I read out the 3 angels' messages. But we needed also something that would also give us a relationship, that lead people to a relationship with Christ. And so we thought we really needed something. So we thought, well, Steps to Christ is perfect. It's one of the nicest little books I've ever read, and it really does lead you through the steps of a relationship with Christ. So we actually paired this book, The Great Controversy, the last 8 chapters, and we put it together and we printed up 15,000 of them. And we thought to ourselves, they all got stored. We ended up storing them under Nunawading Church. And we had this great stack of books, pallets of them. And we thought, what on earth is going to happen? How are we going to? Are these things going to just sit under here and gather dust forever? And then the lockdowns came. This was just before, I think we probably printed them around March 2020. And then the lockdowns came and we were locked away. But God had a plan for what we were going to do with those books. And I'm just going to go a little bit further. There's a bit more of the pictures of books. And, okay. This is a quote. So I'm just going to have a drink of water. This is a quote from Ellen White's book, Evangelism. And I've got quite a few quotes from Ellen White, and the reason I've got so many is that she has a lot to say about what we should be doing in these days, and when it comes to reaching out to people, because let's face it, the world is closing up. The time at which Christ is coming is getting closer and closer, and if you look, you can't help but see it. And she says this. She says, "I was given instruction that as we approach the end, there will be large gatherings in our cities, and that preparations must be made to present the truth at these gatherings. When Christ was upon this earth, he took advantage of such opportunities, and wherever a large gathering of people gathered for any purpose, his voice was heard clear and distinct, giving his message. As a result, after his crucifixion and ascension, thousands were converted in a day. The seed sown by Christ sank deep into the hearts and germinated when the disciples received the gift of the Holy Spirit and the harvest was gathered in." So what's interesting here is that the reason that the disciples could go out and baptise 3,000, 5,000 in a day was because they'd already heard the message. There was a seed already planted. There had to be a seed planted, and Christ is that. It says the disciples. Sorry, next slide. Yep. It says. Sorry, there is a paragraph, I think, missing. I'll read this paragraph. "The disciples went forth and preached the word everywhere with such power that fear fell upon the opposers, and they dared not do that which they would not have done had it not been the evidence being so plain that God was working." And she makes this statement, Ellen White says, "At every large gathering, some of our ministers should be in attendance." And those ministers are not just the employed ones, it'd be us as well. And they should work wisely to obtain a hearing and to get the light of the truth before as many people as possible. At all such gatherings, there should be present men and women whom God can use. Leaflets containing the light of present truth should be scattered among the people like the leaves of autumn. To many who attend these gatherings, these leaflets would be as the leaves of the tree of life, which are for the healing of the nations. I send you this, my brethren, that you may give it to others. Those who go forth to proclaim the truth shall be blessed by him who has given the burden of proclaiming this truth. The time has come when never as before Seventh-day Adventists are to arise and shine, because their light has come and the glory of the Lord has risen upon them. So she's saying here we should be prepared and ready for these large gatherings of large numbers of people, so that we have something to give to them, and we should reach out. And I haven't always known this passage, but this is effectively what happened. Because following the lockdowns, as you remember, there were a lot of protests in Melbourne, a lot of big protests. And the people that had been locked up in in the city, in the houses and all that didn't agree, had some voice to be heard. They came into the city, and many of them were wondering what on earth is going on in this world. We're probably even the ones that didn't, many people that were locked in their houses that didn't go into the city to protest were wondering what on earth is going on. And people are searching the internet, they're going down this rabbit hole, they're going down that rabbit hole. They're looking for truth to try and discover what's happening to the world. We've never been locked in our houses before. We never had a curfew. We'd never been forced to do things against our will that we didn't want to do. And things were changing. What happened to our rights? Where's what happened? And these people were wondering, how could this happen so quickly? Sure, it's a pandemic, but what's happened to the world? And they're wondering, and they're thinking, and what's going on? They need a message. And some of the pictures. And so what we would do, those, I'll tell the story. When I was actually down, I actually got a phone call from Mark. He'd been into the city giving out books. And he said to me, you never guess what happened. He said, I had 250 books on me. And I said, the protest came past and I gave out all of my 250 books that I had brought in for the day in about 20 minutes. He said, you couldn't believe. People just wanted the books. And as I went, he went and people would cross the roads and the books went out like that. And so I was in there the next week giving out books, and I took in about 100 and maybe 180 books, and Mark had, I think, another maybe 300 or 400 books this time. He brought them in on a trolley. When I got there, he'd already given out his 300 books, and then I restocked. We had 180 or so more, and they went out in about another 15, 20 minutes. They'd all gone. We just couldn't give them out fast enough. So we thought, we've hit onto something here. And so this is where it started. And so we thought these protests, there's a real thirst and a real desire to know what's going on. And we were the only ones doing it. And there didn't seem to be, there was no Church of God people out there or any other. It was only really us giving out the books. And there's some of the more protests. And so what we would do is we would we'd either take a box or, and as sometimes we just walk in amongst the protest and we would just hand them out. And other times we would stack them from your hand to the chin. And as the protest came past, it ended up being about 20 of us from various churches that would go into the protest. And as the protest came past, we'd just walk into the front of it and hand them out. And the more books you had, it seemed the more that people wanted the books. It was very interesting. The books we mainly gave out was a copy of the National Sunday Law book, if any of you know that, by Markson, and the other book, which was the combo of the Steps of Christ and the last 8 chapters of the Great Controversy. And between about the 20 or so of us that went in there, some of us would stay by the boxes and they'd be cutting the boxes open, and as we quickly walk back and they'd give us another big bunch, we'd go into the crowd and we'd just give them out, as fast as you could give them out. People would cross the road and they'd see you giving out books and they just wanted our books. And it was amazing. It was a surreal experience, and something you can hardly, unless you've been there to see it, because you got this crowd, maybe thousands of people walking towards you. You're there with your books, and they're all coming with their flags, and some of them have got these big drums like the British are coming, dum, 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 like this, and we're there with our books. And anyway, the books, and they want them, and we couldn't, it was just a surreal experience, and sometimes they'd go past and they'd congregate and we'd just mingle and hand them out. And Christ was definitely working. If we didn't have that stock of books to give out and get ready for it, there would be thousands of people that wouldn't have this sitting on the shelves in there or have read them. And there are many that have read them, and I've got some stories shortly. There's a few more. A bit of the protest. Okay. So this is at Flinders Street Station. We're waiting for a protest to come past. It's a bit of our pile of, you can see there's a few empty boxes in there already. Actually, I think that might have been after the protest at Parliament House, and we'd used up a lot of the books and we brought back what we had. And so in the end, we ended up taking in about 5,000 odd books a day. We'd go in Sabbath morning and Sabbath afternoon, and we would give out 2,000 to 3,000 books in the end per protest. It didn't last for that long, there was a month or so. It was especially before that pandemic legislation was brought in. It was some of the biggest protests that, where there was hundreds of thousands of people, and some of the biggest protests were there, and that's where we got out most of the books. So we went for like 250 odd books a day to like 3,000 or 4,000 books in a day in those protests. Okay, this is one of the protests. I met this lady, Sophia, and I've got a few stories of people. Sophia, she was an Orthodox lady, I think, a Greek Orthodox, I'm not sure, and she'd found the Sabbath, and she'd realised that the Sabbath is the Sabbath, but when I walked up to her and said, well, this is the National Sunday Law book, this is the Steps to Christ, and I told her a bit about what was in that, and she said, I'm really glad I met you, because I don't really know that much about the Sabbath, but I know the Sabbath is the truth day. And I was able to take her back to our table, and we gave her many, or quite a number of books specifically about the studies on the Sabbath day and how important it is. Okay, the other story, some of the things we did then is we went up to the Canberra protest, and I only went once, but I think there was 2 main protests at Canberra. This is about November last year. And there we are, we're setting up. We had actually 4 tables at Canberra. And that's setting up early in the morning on our table. Some of our boxes of cartons of books. And that's Mark with a red hat, and many others. And we discovered that this group, I think here, they came down from north of Sydney. So we found out there was another Adventist group in Sydney that was doing a very similar thing. And they came down, they brought books, and they set up their tables as well. But there's an interesting story here. Eve is the lady with the pink hat. And Eve is interesting. She got boots and all into giving out the books. I met her at the Stall Church down the road here in Stall, Victoria, and she'd been interested in giving out books for many years. And when she heard the sermon, I told this story when we were just starting at the Stall Church, and she was really interested. She came up to our place in Mansfield. I think we gave her about 1,500 of our combo box, and she managed to pick up another 1,000 of the National Sunday Law, and she took it up to the protests, and they gave them out the following week in the Sydney protests. Anyway, so we got in contact with Eve, and we were working with her, supplying her books. And at the Canberra protest, she was coming down with her brother and her children, and her brother has this Land Cruiser, 4x4 agricultural style, a 79 series, I think, with a tray and a big steel canopy, very big 4-wheel drive, bull bar, all the stuff. Anyway, he's loaded it. They're up, I think, near Newcastle, or a little, maybe north of Newcastle. Anyway, they've loaded it up. It's packed full of boxes of books, and for the back tray and the canopy and stuff in the back seat as well. Absolutely loaded to the gunwales. You can imagine how much this weighed. Probably, 4 or 5 tons. Big heavy car. And as they go to leave and back out, they backed over their dog. And it was a real mess apparently. And the dog, they ran over the side of the dog's shoulder and leg, and what could they do? It was late in the day, I think on a Friday or maybe a Thursday, I'm not sure. They had to leave. And the vet, I think where they are, the vet was a fair way away. They didn't know what to do. It was their pet dog. It was a big sort of dog, I think a big sort of black dog. Anyway, they told the story, and I can't probably relay it exactly right, but they said, we just didn't know what to do, and we had to leave, we had to bring the books down. They didn't know whether they should try and do something with the dog, or they just didn't know. And they said they knelt down, they put their hands on this dog, and they prayed. They said, Lord, you know we've got to get to Canberra. What are we going to do? You've got to either take the dog from us now or heal the dog. And they didn't know. And they just prayed and they waited, and then about half an hour later, that dog was up and running around. It was healed. And they got down, they got in the car, they came to Canberra, and they gave out the books. That was just a story of the dog. Amazing that you can run over a dog with a Land Cruiser and God can heal the dog. Yeah, apparently it was pretty bad. So these are some of the people that came down from Sydney. I don't really know who they are, but they set up their table. This is many of you heard of Graham. His name's escaping me, his surname. Hoodie. Yeah, that's right, Graham Hood. Graham was a Qantas pilot, and he senior Qantas pilot. I think he flew right up from their small planes to, he was, I think, a 747 or maybe even the A380 pilot, and a Seventh-day Adventist. And he has quite a personal testimony, and I'd encourage you, if any of you haven't seen his personal testimony, to get online and have a look at his struggles. And but he wouldn't submit to the requirements for the vaccine for Qantas, and put his testimony up online and resigned. Anyway, he became a bit of a figurehead, and he was at Canberra. And he got up, might be another shot of him, no, go back. He got up in front of, I don't know how big the crowd was, tens of thousands of people on the lawn. And he said, today, he said, normally he said, this is my Sabbath. He said, but today, you are my church. And he said, they told me not to pray at this, they didn't want me to pray at this protest. He says, you better not tell me not to pray. And with that, he opened his story with a prayer, and he bowed his head, and the whole protest stopped and waited for him to finish his prayer, and there were many amens at the end of that prayer. And he's been a tremendous witness for the truth of the Sabbath day, and really a leader. He's talked on. I've heard him speak at another protest as well, and where he talks about his God. He talks about the true Sabbath day, and what he believes is right in this for us to do at this time. In this protest, what we would do is we would once again, as they were listening to people speak, we would take our arms with books and we would go into the people and hand them out. But one thing we did discover worked pretty well, because it was a pretty dispersed protest, we would load up this little cart with all the books, all the Sunday law books, the Great Controversy, various other prophetic books, Steps to Christ, and we walk in and we would just walk into the crowd and we would hand out these books. And you can see how many can fit in there, quite a lot. And then we come back, we fill up the cart again and go out again. And get those out into the people's hands. Some more pictures. It was a great day. It was good weather. This is a guy I met. I can't remember his name. Anyway, he's a fireman, and he'd lost his job. He'd come down to protest, and he told me a story that he was a coach at the local football team, I think, and he stood in front of his 12-year-old kids, and he said to them, "You want to know who the toughest man that ever lived was?" And they're thinking, "Who's this? Who could this be?" And he said, "Jesus Christ is the toughest guy that ever lived." He said, "What he's done for us, you've got to know." And so he coaches his football team, and he teaches them about God, I suppose, where he gets the opportunity. And he'd received the copies of, I think it was, I don't know which Sunday law book, or maybe another book about the Sabbath a week or two earlier. And he told me, he says, "I'm a Christian for a fair while." He said, "But I didn't know about the Sabbath." And he said, "I've now, in the last couple of weeks," and so I think he was at the Sydney protest, he said, I now know about the Sabbath. And I spoke to him for about half an hour or 40 minutes, and he actually's got a Bible in his hand, I think. Yeah, he got a Bible in his hand, and he wanted a Bible. And there's another interesting story in these Bibles. We learned Eve managed to get hold of 600 Bibles, and she brought 600 Bibles down to the protests, and we were able to give them out. And the interesting thing, people would come to the table, and they wanted a Bible. Many of them didn't have Bibles, and we were able to give them out Bibles. And another interesting thing is that I heard many times the people come to the table and says, "Oh, I want a King James Bible." Obviously, they've been looking, and they'd found that the King James was the one that they should get, and so they were asking for it. And so we managed to secure a bulk number of Bibles a bit after the Canberra protests, and we now have those to hand out as well as all the other books. But it was good because we've been giving out our Sunday Law book, we've been giving out the Great Controversy, we've been giving out Steps to Christ, but we didn't have that many Bibles. But we now have a stack of Bibles. We also have the Bible study guides to go with it, a bunch of study guides to hand out with the Bible as well, so people... And we don't only have King James, we have a few of the other versions as well, and different things for different people. A little bit about that. We went to, same thing again, we went to Wangaratta, had a freedom sort of market. It was another setup, we had another crowd, and we just went out and handed the books out. Many people were influenced, and I've just got a couple of stories to tell you. I won't take too much time, but some of the things, how things worked out, and we gave out all these books, and we know they had an effect. One lady came across, she crossed the road, and she had our combo book, but she didn't have the Sunday Law book. And she said to me, she said, I've got this one, I've got to have the Sunday Law book. Have you got one? We said, no, we've run out, we're sorry. She said, we've got to have one. Are you sure? No, we didn't have one. And she came back 5 minutes later, she went across the road, she came back and she said, I've got one, I borrowed it from that guy there and I'm not giving it back. So she had that. She had, Mark ran into a fellow at the, I think he was a Filipino courier or something. He was having a lunch or something like this. He sat down, and he happened to see the guy's electric bike, and he was talking to him about the electric bike, and the guy said to Mark, what do you do? He says, well, I give out books in the city. And he says, oh, this is our ministry. We hand out books to tell people about Christ's soon return. And with that, the random Filipino guy opens his phone, and he showed Mark a picture of his bedside table. And on the side of his bedside table was the Great Controversy, Patriarchs and Prophets, Sunday Law book, Steps to Christ. And he said that this guy had got all our books and he was reading them every night. He said they would change. They're obviously having an impact on the guy. There's many people. There was another. There was many great experiences I've had on the tables giving out books. I remember there was another lady came up to us, and she was this little homeless lady, and she was. You could see she was homeless. She lived on the streets or something like this, and she had a little cardigan, little bag, and on her face, what was interesting, her face was completely tattooed from the top down to the bottom, right across half of it. And a picture of this baby like falling backwards, disappearing. It was an interesting tattoo to have on one's face. And you think, my goodness, what's happened to this lady? That she's got this face tattoo. Anyway, we said, would you like a Bible? And she said, oh, no, I've got one. And she said, and with that, she reaches into this little bag and she's digging around, and she pulled out this little pink, portable little Bible. And you think to yourself, boy, that's the most precious thing she owns, is her Bible. So many people. Guy walked up. Apparently, he came into the city to give out books a few weeks ago, and he'd received our books. He'd gone and got baptised. I think he was baptised in Nunawading Church, and he's come back in to give out books. I didn't know who he was, and I was thinking, who's this guy? and he was someone that had been baptised. We've had people walk into the ABC wanting more books because they'd got us. And so many people have had life-changing experiences because they've received the word, because someone gave it to them. And got a special person here today that I'd like to ask to come up just to have to tell his story. Steve, would you come up and and tell us a bit about your story? Thank you.
Hi all, I'm Steve O'Brien. I grew up as a Catholic boy, had God in my life during my teen years, and then couldn't put it all together, how life was meant to be. So I went on, and when I was about 21, I sort of moved away from the church and lived a life of, had 3 kids and got married, etc. All through that time, I followed what Jesus would do. I used to ask myself, what would Jesus do in this situation? But I didn't really have a belief in God at all, because to me it was just some ghost thing that people talked about, so it wasn't really there, although I had him there in my younger years. So I went through a life of, why me? Why does this happen to me? I had good times, bad times, and I find everything that happens in our lives is God dropping a message for us in front of us to pick up and do with it what we should. And a lot of times we get the wrong message and we just go down the wrong pathways. And so my life was a mixture of pathways. And I think when I was living in New South Wales at the time, and I came down to Victoria, when these protests started and the lockdown started, you know, I was still kind-hearted, hopefully a good person at that stage. And I used to drive from Leopold across to Port Arlington, and while the lockdowns were on, and I'd look across at Melbourne, this beautiful black shining silhouette sparkling away, because there was no traffic, there was no one travelling, people locked in their houses 23 hours a day. And it was pretty hard. I used to cry sometimes going into Port Arlington, looking at Melbourne, I think of the poor buggers over there. But it really inspired some sort of kindness inside me. So I've got to do something about this. What am I going to do? So as I did, thousands of other people went to protest. You know, it was the best I could do at the time. So I was going to these protests, but I just had to do something else. And I was searching for something. There's something better in this life, you know. And so I spoke to a lot of people on the protests, and this lady just came out of the blue, and she pulled this book out of her bag and said, "You need to read this." And I went, "Okay, how much?" And she said, No, take it. And the beautiful lady's name was Waldina, and she goes to church in Wangaratta, Seventh-day Adventist lady. And anyway, so I took this book and I shelved it, as a lot of people probably do. I was reading other books and doing other things. And then after a few months, I still had a passion to support people who were going through hard times. And so I put a notification on a Facebook page. It was, you know, jobs without jabs or something that I was following. And this lovely lady commented on how good my post was, and her name was Rebecca. And we communicated, and she was a Seventh-day Adventist, and her dad is part of the motorcycle ministry, which is ironic because I own a motorcycle, so I've gone to trips to Wangaratta with the guys. So Rebecca was just sending me messages and quotes from the Bible and just guidance, and I was encouraging that because I knew I needed something. And then I thought, well, I'm going to start reading this book. So I started reading this book, and it really gave me a lot of more confidence. I'm a pretty brave person, but it gave me a lot of guidance in how I can be more evangelistic and speak up for the Word of God, because in the Great Controversy it talks about our forefathers, Martin Luther and the Waldenans, who actually would burn at the stake and put their lives on the line, and their families were tortured and killed because they renounced what was in the Bible. They spoke about what was in the Bible, and they wouldn't flinch from what God taught us, Jesus taught us, and they were crucified for it, basically, as was Jesus. But I thought, well, they're willing to die for this. So it gave me a lot more strength, and I worked out what I was searching for, and with Rebecca's help and the help of this book, it brought me back to the church. And I came back to the church, and it led me on a pathway and brought me back to God and gave me a real realisation as to what we're here for. And I feel I'm on a really good pathway, like most of us are, and we just got to have the courage and just keep pursuing what we believe in, and spreading the word, and being like the angels, blowing our trumpets, and saying, don't have the bravery to stand up and mention the word God and Jesus. And for years and years I've never been able to mention that in a conversation, but I find I'm walking up to random people in the street saying, because I gave up drinking, and that's my key point is, I say, oh, how you going, mate? You looking well? Yeah. Oh, yeah, I gave up drinking. Oh, how'd you do that? Oh, well, I sort of come back to God, and, so I say, well, I try to do what Jesus does, and I'm more assertive now. I don't drink. And it leads into faith and my faith, and it's surprising the people that come to me and just start asking more questions. You've come from this life, and now you've got faith, and it draws them to me, but it also draws them to God, and it's sort of like it's a great pleasure and great joy to be able to have the faith in God, and He can talk through me, in those situations. But if it wasn't for the likes of Waldina handing out those books, and you guys doing what you do, like the song "Amazing Grace," I was blind, but now I see. I was searching, and I forgot the words, Amazing Grace, anyway. I'm not going to sing it for you. But it really, to me, it really saved me, and it gave me a step to supporting, giving out the books and being evangelistic just in your words, and having the courage, as these people in this book did, to be able to stand up and stand up for what you believe in. And when I was, as a child, my old man was very blunt, my dad, who passed away in August, but he was 95, and he was down the line, didn't portray any sort of Christian, I go to church, etc. He was a very quiet man. He was, his words spoke louder, his actions spoke louder than his words, but I remember the words he used to say was, look after your mate, go and help that bloke. And stand up for what you believe in. If you believe in it, you stand up for it. And, he taught us how to box, and he taught us, how to work. So all that coming together, I think on his passing, those sorts of traits have, now I can stand up for what I believe in, and I can stick up for my mates. And, as I keep going back to the book, and Rebecca and those sorts of people have brought me to the light and follow Jesus again, and I think that's a big lesson is, we've got to have the courage to give out books, or to talk to somebody and suggest it, and suggest what God wants for us, and I think that's how we're going to blow our trumpets, and then we've got to be the watchman. I feel I'm a watchman. We talked about that a few months ago, being a watchman, and we've got to sound the word that God's coming back, and Jesus is coming back, and we've got to prepare people. So we don't want to let them go by the wayside, So we're God's shepherds as well. We've got to pull people back in, and so that's about it. Thank you. No worries at all.
Amen. Amen. What a testimony, first-hand experience, a first-hand example of of reaching out and bringing someone to God and helping them. And look, one of the impressions is just also, you'll know, and for those that have reached out to people, one of the things that's been amazing for me in reaching out is you meet the most amazing people, and you meet people that you just wouldn't, if you didn't do something, they wouldn't have a piece of information that could really lead them to Christ. I've met many nice, normal people, like the fireman guy. The same day I met a lady, a blonde lady I remember, and she was just searching. And it makes you feel glad that it makes you feel as though it was worth it. Because it takes a bit of courage sometimes to be bold and step out. it makes you feel that you've done something for Christ, and in that you feel better and you feel good. And the most amazing people are out there, and they're lost. They're wondering what's going on. They're searching for something, but they're not quite there yet. They just need that little bit of help. And I'd encourage people to really think on that. You know, you will meet people. If this church were to set up a table in the mall every Sabbath, there would be people that would be reached. I'm certain of it. That wouldn't otherwise be reached. Nice, normal people that need to be saved, that need to be spoken to, that need to have a message given to them. And that's one of the things, the overriding experience of meeting the people and the people that Christ died for. A little story, how I believe that God is working in this ministry. I'll just tell you this story, why we give out one of the reasons we give out the National Sunday Law book. Mark was in Chiang Mai, I think it was, in Thailand, giving out the Great Controversy. It's the small version of it. Walked up to these young ladies, Americans, and I can't remember the girl's name, but I did know it. Anyway, he said, "Would you there's two of them. Would you young ladies who'd like a copy of the national, the Great Controversy? It tells about the National Sunday Law that's soon to be introduced in the world, and it gives how worship laws are going to be brought in." No, we're not interested. Thanks, but we're on our way anyway. They walked away. They get a few metres away, and the young lady turns around and she comes back. She said, "Did you say National Sunday Law?" And Mark says, "Yeah, the National Sunday Law." And she said, "I want to show you something." She said, 3 or 4 months before they got to Thailand, she said, "I was in New York on a train, and I hopped up to get out of the train, and I looked down and there was a book on the seat of the train." And she said, I looked at this book because there was something funny about this book. There was a light emanating from the book. And I thought to myself, that's interesting. I've never seen a book that glows before. So she said, I took a photo of the book. And that's the photo that she took. And you can see there is a light coming off the book. And it's in the sunlight itself, but there's still a light coming off the book. And so there was definitely something odd about that book, that this young lady would take the time to take a photo of a book on a train seat. And she said, and the miracle is that God knew that she was going to meet Mark some months later on the other side of the world and receive a copy of the Great Controversy. Why else would she take a picture of that book? And I think he was able to give her a copy of that book as well. So God plans out for people to receive the books. So that there is a miracle, a photograph of a miracle. Light coming off a book. Yeah. This story, you'll know, is the story of the 10 virgins. It's in Matthew 24. I won't read it for time, but we all know this story. We've got 10 virgins, and they're waiting for the bridegroom. And 5 of them have brought a bit more oil than the other 5. And as they're waiting for the... I might turn to it. As they're waiting for the bridegroom, they fall asleep. And then as the bridegroom comes... There's 5 that have got enough oil to go into the wedding feast, and 5 that don't. And they said, go off and buy, go and buy from them that have got oil. And you think, these are really the Advent people. They're waiting, they're virgins, they're keeping themselves pure, they're waiting for the return of Christ. But 5 have got enough oil and 5 haven't. Why is that? Why have 5 got oil and 5 haven't? And you think to yourself, well, they're pretty much the same. They're all virgins. They're all waiting for the wedding feast. And I think that the answer for that lies in Zechariah. In Zechariah chapter 4, it tells the story of Zerubbabel. Does anyone know the story of Zerubbabel? People heard of it? Zerubbabel was like the leader that led the children of Israel out to build the second temple. And he had this vision. And it's found in Zechariah, and I'll just read a couple of verses. And he received a vision in his sleep, and it said, and the angel said to me, what seest thou? It's in verse 2. I looked, and behold, a candlestick full of gold, and a bowl on the top of it, and 7 lamps thereon, and 7 pipes of 7 lamps. and 2 olive trees, which really olive trees we know from Revelation represent the Old and the New Testament, don't they? And one upon the right side of the bowl and upon the left side. And I answered and spoke to the angel that talked with me, saying, "What are these, my Lord?" And the angel said to me, "Don't you know what these are?" I said, "No, knowest thou what these be?" And I said, "No, my Lord." And he answered and said, "This is the word of the Lord that came to me." He said, "Not by night, not by my power, but by my spirit, said the Lord." So the answer is, what's going on here with this is the Spirit is coming via the oil that goes into the lamps. And the light that is shining is wicking the oil through. The oil is being drawn through by the light. And that's where we need to let our light shine. And I believe that's the answer to the why some of those virgins have got oil. Some have got a constant supply because they're letting their light shine. And, there's many ways to let your light shine. You don't have to go and stand in front of a crowd of people coming with drums. But there's many ways to do that, and we need to be ready for that. I've got a few quotes. I'm almost finished, but I wanted to read a few quotes to bring the importance of the book ministry to you, to give you some understanding of how important I believe it is to put books in front of the people of the world. It's a quote, and I'm sorry for the small. Well, it's not that small. This is from the Cole Porter Ministry book. It's a compilation book, but it's got some amazing messages in there. I don't know how many people have ever picked up Cole Porter Ministries and had a read of it. It's got some amazing messages. The first one is from a letter Ellen White wrote in 1903. It says, "As important as preaching, the ministerial evangelist who engages in canvassing work is performing a service fully as important as preaching the gospel before the congregation Sabbath after Sabbath. God looks upon the faithful evangelistic canvasser with as much approval as he looks upon the faithful minister. Both workers have a light, and both are to shine in their respective spheres of influence. God calls upon every man to cooperate with the great medical missionary worker and go forth into the highways and the byways. Every man in his particular line of service has a work to do for God. Such labourers, if converted, are true missionaries." She's saying that the giving out the books is as important as being a minister and preaching every Sabbath. This is from page 128 of the Cole Porter Ministry. She says, "The great controversy is above silver or gold. The great controversy should be widely circulated. It contains the story of the past, the present, and the future. In its outline of the closing scenes of Earth's history, it bears a powerful testimony to the truth." She said, "I am more anxious to see the wide circulation of this book for any others. I have written for, in the great controversy, the last message of warning to the world, given more distinctly than in other books, than my other books." Okay. I think I've skipped a page, but it doesn't matter. No, I'll skip one because I got out of sequence, but it doesn't matter. She says that books will be taken from the shelves. So these books that get given to people, they sit there like little seeds ready to germinate, little time bombs waiting to go off. She says it is true that some buy books and they will lay them on the shelf or place them on the parlour table and seldom look for them. Still, God has a care for his truth, and the time will come when these books will be sought and read. Sickness or misfortune may enter the home, and through the truth contained in the books, God sends to troubled hearts peace and hope and rest. In the miracle of feeding the multitude with a few loaves and fishes, food was increased as it passed from Christ to those who accepted it. Thus it will be in the distribution of our publications. God's truth, as it is passed out, will multiply greatly. So these books, what is given out, sits on the shelves, it's waiting, and God will see to it, just like the loaves and the fishes, that it will be multiplied into the hearts of people. And as disciples by Christ's direction gathered up the fragments and which remained, that nothing should be lost, so we should treasure every fragment of literature containing the truth for this time. She says, 1,000 in one day, God will soon do great things for us as if we lie humble, believing at his feet. More than 1,000 will soon be converted in one day, most of whom will trace their first convictions to the reading of our publications. So, see how important it is? We're wondering how, when the Holy Spirit is poured out at that last time before he comes, and we have to give that last cry message, how is it going to happen? It's these seeds that have been laid will sprout this and allow these people to be brought into God's church. It's really important. I think that there's something else coming. There'll be another disaster. There'll be another lockdown. Something big is brewing, and we need to get ready to put our ammunition aside. We need to have our hearts ready and prepared for what's coming. You can't prepare for the storm in the storm. You have to get ready before it comes. God saw to it that he gave us those books, that we were able to print those before the last lockdowns. We wouldn't, before those protests came, we had the ammunition ready. There's a quote that also that I wanted to read from Ellen White. I've got to find where it comes from. PH, I'm not sure. It says, the servants of God, with their face lighted up, shining with holy consecration, will hasten from place to place to proclaim the message. We're going to have to, at some point, go out and actually reach the people, and we must do that. And she says, another which is in Testimonies for the Church, Volume 5, she says, the work which the Church has failed to do in the time of peace and prosperity, she will have to do in a terrible crisis, under the most discouraging and forbidding conditions. Imagine if you had to go out door-to-door knocking in August of 2020, when everyone's locked in their house thinking, the virus is going to get me, and you had to go and knock on the door when you were under lockdown. How would you feel doing it? It's now's the time. We need to get ready. We need to get and be prepared, and to give out the message in the good times. It won't be possible in the really difficult times. So that's my message today. Thank you for everyone for listening and bearing with it. I pray you manage to get your own, if you don't already have one, book ministry and get going, and that you can reach out with those books and to the people that would come to God. Thank you.